Biscuit joints share some of the characteristics of a slot and spline joint. Here in this cutaway biscuit joint, you can see what a biscuit joint really is. There's two semicircular grooves that are cut in the mating pieces, and then this little oval football-shaped thing is the actual biscuit, and it's glued into the slot, and that gives plenty of face grain to face grain gluing surface on those two boards. You can see a little better here in this miter joint what it really looks like. You've got two matching slots cut in mating pieces, and then the biscuit is glued into that slot. The two pieces are assembled, and once the glue dries, you have a nice solid bond there. Now, biscuits do add a little bit of mechanical strength to a joint, but I think they're really primarily better used as alignment aids. On a joint like this one, where again we have end grain meeting edge grain, you do increase the strength of that joint significantly by adding the face grain to face grain of a biscuit. Same thing with a miter. You have an end grain to end grain joint primarily. A biscuit there can help that miter joint increase the strength of that miter joint significantly. If you're going to be doing joints that are edge grain to edge grain already, a very strong glue joint, adding biscuits to that really doesn't increase the strength that significantly. But in that case, it does help keep that joint aligned so that when you're gluing things up, it doesn't slip up and down. Biscuits are very easy to cut. They go very quickly. You can also join boards in a variety of combinations, whether you're doing something like for a face frame, where you'd have end to edge. If you're doing a shelf into a cabinet side, where you've got, again, end into edge. They're very versatile joints. They're cut with a biscuit joiner, special tool. It has a fence and a motor, and if you look closely, as you plunge the motor forward, you can see the little circular blade that exposes itself down along the bottom of the fence. That blade, of course, is what cuts that semicircular slot. Let me show you how this works. So let's say I want to make an edge-to-edge joint with these two boards here. I want the ends to align perfectly. To start making a biscuit joint, I just decide, where do I want my biscuits? I want one there, and I want one there. Just make lines across that joint line. Doesn't really matter where they are, just don't want to put too many in, and you don't want too few. So on the boards that long, about two seems right. Take one board, turn it around. I'm just going to clamp this to the bench so it doesn't slide on me. There's a mark centered on the fence. Align that mark with the mark you made on the edge of the board, pull the trigger, and plunge the tool in. Same thing over here. Move my clamp down just a bit. Align that mark with that, pull the trigger. Just that quickly, that board is done. Let's do the mate. Now the slots I cut were for the largest biscuits, which are number 20. And we'll put a biscuit in each one just to test our fit. And that's ready for glue up. Now, one thing you'll notice about biscuit joints, I mentioned I want these boards to be perfectly flush on the ends. I've got a little bit of play there, so I can slide them back and forth. So it's a very forgiving joint too. To glue up, just a matter of putting a little bit of glue in each slot and then clamping the pieces together. Let that dry. Now, this is an edge-to-edge joint. You should probably put extra glue on there, but I just want to demonstrate the biscuit joinery for this purpose. Now, if you want to take a couple of pieces and join them in a T, such as you're putting a shelf or a divider in a cabinet, process is very similar. We're going to put one biscuit right in the middle, or about in the middle. Just make a mark there and there, no measuring needed. The piece that's going to be the shelf, we're going to mark where that goes right along there. Take this one, clamp it to the bench, and make the slot in the end. Okay, now to do the mating slot in the middle, I'm going to adjust the fence so it's up like that. Again, use my mark. Align the fence right along my line. There's a mark on the base there that I align with the mark on the workpiece. And I'm going to take my one I just cut here, put the edges flush, help it square up the tool to the mark, and make the cut. Now the number 20 biscuit in there. See how well things line up. Right on the pencil mark. So now with some glue in that joint, that's going to be a nice reinforcement for a end grain to face grain joint. Okay, let's talk a little bit more in detail about biscuits and biscuit joinery. There are three sizes of biscuits. You've got a 0, a 10, and a 20. A 0, 10, and a 20. And they get bigger with the bigger numbers. You can see the 0 compared to the 20, quite a bit difference in length. That brings us to a point that you need to consider is the width of your workpiece when you're cutting biscuits. Here in this miter joint, I have a number 0 biscuit. It fits fine in this miter joint. Slot doesn't cut through the ends. Now, however, if I were to try to cut a 0 slot in the end of this 2-inch wide workpiece, you can see that the biscuit itself is almost as wide as the workpiece. If I were to cut a slot that wide in there, those slots would show there. So you must have a piece at least 2 1/4 inches wide for a 0 biscuit and progressively wider for each of the larger sizes. Another tip, going back to our edge glued panel where I glued in the biscuits, you do not want to start gluing up biscuits and then immediately sand the panel after that glue is still dry or still wet. You want to wait at least overnight to allow the glue to dry, and here's why. When you add the glue to the biscuits, these biscuits are compressed beech. Some of that water in the glue causes the biscuits to swell slightly, and that raises just an ever so slight bump in the joint on your panel. If you start sanding that while that's raised, then as the glue evaporates and the glue dries, the water evaporates, you're going to have a little depression there where you sanded. That's going to shrink back down. So if you're going to use biscuits for edge gluing joints, glue in the biscuits, allow the assembly to dry for at least 8 hours, just let it sit overnight, then come back the next day, and then do your sanding. You won't have any trouble that way.